Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure a few people will continue to join as we continue with this. So first of all, I want to welcome you to our second HCDC Data Talk called Understanding Local Transportation Infrastructure and Safety Concerns. Like I said, we're so glad that you could join us today. My name is Katie Wang, and I'm the program coordinator for the Houston Community Data Connections program here at the Kinder Institute for Urban Research. And before we get started with the main event, I want to give you some background on the Houston Community Data Connections program, or HCDC as we like to call it. So HCDC seeks to facilitate the practical use of data by city and community leaders for decision-making and capacity building in Houston's disadvantaged communities. And in pursuit of this mission, we use neighborhood-level data to conduct community-focused research. So, for example, the gentrification research that was the subject of our first webinar back in February follows this model in the sense that we used existing neighborhood-level data to dive deeply into the research question, what is the state of gentrification in Harris County? But we also collect neighborhood level data through community-focused research, and today's webinar will focus on this kind of project. Our senior research fellow, Dian Nostikasari, collected extensive data from residents to highlight issues of safety in Gulfton, and you'll hear more about this in just a moment. In addition to conducting neighborhood level research, we attempt to help build other organizations' data capacity through training, whether that's in the form of webinars, in-person trainings, etc. And we do this because we believe that all of our research findings can be used to engage community members and stakeholders and support decision-making in various institutions and settings. So right now we're in the program's second year of existence, and this year we're really focusing on establishing valuable data-related trainings for the greater Houston community. These trainings will include Data 101 type of workshops, sessions on how to use our HCDC data tools, and more. For example, we are currently collaborating with Fondren Library here at Rice to deliver a series of 3 basic data literacy trainings to 3 different communities throughout Houston, including young students in the 5th Ward and 3rd Ward, as well as nonprofit staff from across the city. A core part of our HCDC program is the data products that are freely and openly available online. These include our HCDC Dashboard, which is a robust online dashboard that provides multi-purpose community profiles with a wide array of neighborhood-level indicators highlighting disparities and other local issues. The dashboard hosts over 100 neighborhood-level indicators and includes an interactive indicator map, community profiles, and a compare function that allows users to explore data from 2 to 3 different communities at once. And we've also created the HCDC Gallery, which you can see there on the right, in which we convert complex research and data into accessible and interactive visuals like graphs, charts, and maps. And these rich visuals show the stories in data in ways that can help you share your own insights about your community. We also offer a number of data-related services, including data analysis, research design, and training, and these services are available upon request. Since the beginning of the program, we've received over 100 data service requests from nonprofits, researchers, and other local institutions. So what you've joined today, our Data Talks webinar series, is meant to add to the existing resources that we offer. Through this training tool, we aim to showcase our research products, further facilitate the use of HCDC tools, and demonstrate how the data that we showcase can be used in other initiatives and research. So I invite you to explore our HCDC dashboard a bit as we conduct this webinar. You can do so by going to datahouston.org, which we'll switch the screen over there really quickly to show you what that looks like. So this is what you'll view when you go to the homepage at datahouston.org. And you can see there, you can click on the HCDC dashboard, that first tab to the left. And then navigate to the community profile function, either in the sidebar or on that main page. And today we'll invite you to explore Gulfton, since that's the area of study that Dian will be talking about today. So if you can select Gulfton in the drop-down menu, there. And then click it on the map. And then the subject of today's webinar will actually, the data for that is found in the Featured Indicators tab. And so you can navigate to those different aspects of the research that Dian conducted and view interactive tools and maps to explore some of that research a bit more. So I don't want to give it all away because Dian will talk about this extensively during her presentation, but I just wanted to give you that resource so that you can kind of follow along and see for yourself what that tool looks like. And then if you have any questions, you can submit those during the webinar and we can address them at the end. So just a few guidelines for participation. Please use the chat button at the bottom of your screen to type questions to the HCDC team during the presentation. We'll monitor these throughout the duration of the webinar and select a number of them to answer at the end of the presentation. That means that please don't start your video during the presentation. We're going to take care of the video and share our own screens, but like I said, if you have questions, feel free to submit those via the chat box. And then as always, if you have more questions about this or other services after the webinar, feel free to email our team at hcdc@rice.edu. So now I'm going to hand it over to Senior Research Fellow Dian Nostikasari, who authored the report that's the subject of today's session.
Welcome everyone, and if you could just please bear with me while I share my screen. Okay, so today we will be going over some of the findings that of two studies that we conducted in Gulfton neighborhood in Southwest Houston. One is Planning from Inside Out, and which looks into community responses and perceptions of safety and infrastructure concerns. And then the other one is based on our walk audits that we conducted in the neighborhoods and looking into walking and biking in infrastructure in Gulfton. So here are several objectives that we want to kind of try to get at today. Is first to learn about the key findings, right? And then also discover tools for assessing, accessing walking and biking infrastructure. So I'll go over, how we conducted the walk audit briefly. And then also review resources that can help us understand how safety is perceived in our communities, and also understand how to access the data and use it in your place-based projects. So first of all, Gulfton is located in southwest of Houston. If you can see here in the highlighted in the darkened part of Houston. And if you're not familiar with Gulfton, it is the majority of the residents there are Hispanic or Latino, and then it is majority foreign-born residents, but there's also I think over 30 languages spoken in Gulfton alone, and a big percentage of the residents are renters. Our study that we conducted in looking at residents' perception of safety was delivered using a survey method, and we had 306 responses in which during the course of 4 months we really go out into the neighborhoods and talk to residents and really try to get at this local based data collection process in understanding how do people go to places and what are their daily concerns, and what would they see as something that could improve those concerns. We have 306 responses, 59% in Spanish, and the rest is spoken in English, Arabic, and Urdu. And just kind of like a little bit overview of what the responses are. First of all, when people in Gulfton get to work much more using public transportation compared to the city as well as the neighborhood itself. And also people that we surveyed also use other means of transportation like walking and biking much more than the neighborhood and the city. So we asked questions about locations and if they were able to identify streets that they perceive as dangerous, and if they've seen issues there, if they have witnessed a crash or a near miss, if they have experienced it themselves. These are the ranking of the streets name that came out from the study, which you can see the majority of the streets are really kind of the major thoroughfare, Hillcroft, Bel Air, a lot of activities going on there, and then other streets in the neighborhoods. And we also asked them to identify kind of like not just the streets, but also location, problem areas. And out of that, we were able to do some type of cluster analysis and looking at the frequency of these incidents happening based on our survey alone. So we have the red dots, which are identified problem areas by the residents, and the purple dots on the map is identified near miss or crash locations. So those are kind of two separate things that we see where safety overall is not necessarily about, being in conflict with other road users in terms of near misses or crash, but it also relates to overall safety environment, like concerns about crime, for example. There are two major locations that were identified, which is mainly at the Neighborhood Social Service Hub at Hillcroft Avenue and High Star Drive. Around this area, this is where there are at least 3 schools are located also there. And then the large apartment complex, which are also co-located with some schools in the neighborhood. And then we also asked them, like, what would make your travel, more safe, and what would you like to see happening in your neighborhood to address the safety concerns? When we compound the answers together, there's like this. The answer resulted in high improvement in bus services, which is not a surprise because Gulfton have the highest transit ridership in the city, and so these are residents in this neighborhood are people who are highly dependent on transit, and a lot of times out of necessity rather than choice. And there's also safer and walking and biking infrastructures, looking at more sidewalks, bikeways, better lighting and crosswalks and separation from cars. Another emerging theme came out as like having to less worry about crime or unpleasant contact with others. Again, thinking about neighborhood safety as just are interconnected with all these different elements. Another study that we conducted in Gulfton was aimed to complement, the residents' perception of safety is looking at conditions of existing infrastructure. And we conducted a series of walk audit in which we have residents and volunteers come and conducted a walk audit with us. And so we find that, sidewalks and access to transit in Gulfton are somewhat adequate. But then the conditions of these infrastructures really affect connectivity to places. So it's not a matter whether it is just an existing sidewalk, but then the condition of sidewalks affect the ability of people, especially people with very limitations on mobility. So people rolling in wheelchair, pushing strollers, have to navigate through sidewalks that are broken or disconnected. And then bikeways and safe crossing facilities are especially poor in the neighborhood. And I'll go over a little bit of what we see here, that, there are sidewalks on 60% of the segment, but 41% of those have some kind of obstruction. And then connectivity to transit stop is a problem because over half of sidewalks with transit stop have some kind of obstructions. And this is a major concern, especially Gulfton being very reliant on transit. And then we're going to go over a little bit about how do we use this type of information to advocate for your community and neighborhoods. And these are several examples that, in which this data collection have been used for other purposes. So several groups a couple of while back come to Houston City Council meetings to speak about safety improvements across the city, especially people from Gulfton came about too. And so, for example, Connect Community distributed a map showing sidewalk conditions near schools in Gulfton, and then showing that a lot of the schools in Gulfton may have some kind of sidewalk, but a lot of them also are sidewalks with obstructions. So that also again affect the ability of people to getting to that school. Another example of how it has, this particular type of data can be used is how you can show existing sidewalk data with location of schools, and also if you have information about homes with where we have people with one or more physical disability. And this particular map use existing sidewalks data that was collected by the Houston Galveston Area Council. They had conducted a region-wide analysis of where the sidewalks are located. So the blue lines would indicate that there is a sidewalk. And this is in a near Northside neighborhood, which is another neighborhood that we are conducting similar studies in. And what I wanted to show is that, information like this can be useful for different organizations as they're advocating for safety around school, for example, and think about the different funding opportunities or grants that give money to safety improvements around school. And so we work with people at Luskin Elementary to kind of think about, where are the most important areas or important roads that you can improve connectivity and safety once we know what the existing built environment looks like. I'm going to go a little bit about how do we showcase those data at the Houston Community Data Connection Dashboard. We're going to go over that and look at how it is being showcased at the HCDC dashboard. You can see that we put in this map on the dashboard, and this map looks at sidewalk hazards and obstructions, no conditions. And we have the layers showing schools or bus stop locations. So if you want to click on the schools, it will show locations of the schools that we previously showed in the presentation. And then also location of bus stops. So you can begin to see how connectivity to very important destinations in the neighborhood are affected by existing sidewalks condition. And so there's on this side, you will see how to use the map. And we've also put the data, which comes in the form of Excel spreadsheet that you can download, and it has data and information on how each road segments fare in terms of kind of the conditions. Okay, so we are going to go over on the tools that we use to conduct our walk audit that leads to the information we talked about previously. The first tool is what we call a segment audit, and it looks at the conditions of the street. So a segment is one side of a street. So if you can see Franklin Street, it would have two segments on each side. And what we did was we mapped the area, and then we named each segment where As you can see in the highlighted part, we assigned S185 for the north part of Franklin Street, and then we put the ID into the corresponding form. So you can do this in your own area. Perhaps if you want to look within walking distance from a school, for example, then you can kind of map your area and then identify each segment, and then go through the questions that are laid out in this form. And we have a training manual that goes with the form, which review each questions and give information on how to answer this. For example, are there questions about major trip hazards? Give examples of major trip hazards that are commonly found. The first one is overgrowth, and then a kind of uneven sidewalk and a broken sidewalks. And then the other questions that ask about buffer talks about what a buffer means. It is an area that separates vehicular traffic with perhaps a pedestrian traffic or a bicyclist traffic, and kind of like some of the examples of what a buffer can look like. And we also have, here you can find a link to the training manual. Another form that we use is an intersection audit. It looks at the area where two streets meet, which is the definition of the intersection. So here, Franklin Street and Main Street meets at N3. And there's two components in the intersection audit. There is that area where people cross and across the street, going from this corner to this corner, and then this another area is a corner, is the place where a person stands as they wait to cross the street. And the questions also ask this question, refer to all this, and provides a unique ID for each of the segment. And this is the area. You will have each of these areas defined and outlined in each form. And we also have, kind of like more clarifications in the training manual, where you can look at the different crossings and the different the different corners, and answer accordingly. And this is an example for questions about pedestrian walk signals, where it is asking, whether there is a presence of pedestrian walk signals in crossing 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you will often see these walk signals. It comes in this, in the image of a person walking, or the image of a hand, a white hand for a yes walk. And then another example of the manual looks into the crossing where there are ramps. And a ramp is an area where people rolling in wheelchair or pushing stroller can go from the sidewalk pavement onto the street to cross the street. And there's some images where you can see a corner where there is no ramp versus a corner where there is a ramp. And there are some streets where we have ramps, but they are non-ADA compliant, which they are not up to the standards of the American Disability Act. And these are all very important considerations, especially when we think about our most vulnerable residents and street users that has to traverse the street. And again, a link to the training manual. So we'll also talk about the other resources that we can use to complement the data that we collect. So the most traffic engineers or transportation officials use official data crash report by the police to inform to inform places where there have been crashes in the past and the severity of those crashes. And what we're thinking, what we're trying to do with this study is to think about how those crashes are related to the existing built environment and really to complement this officially collected data sources. But I'm going to go through a database that the Texas Department of Transportation has on their website that where everyone can access where the crashes are located in your community. And there is a link that you can click on, and it will take you to a PDF document that shows how step-by-step process on how to use the database, especially related to pedestrian and people riding bicycle. And this manual was developed by a senior transportation planner at the Gulfton area council to just kind of like give an idea on how we can use this data. This is an example of of locations where 10 people have been killed in the year 2019 in the city of Houston. So the map will show you the locations of the crashes, and you will also have different options on how to present the information. And this is another example of a map showing within the same year how many crashes resulted in suspected serious injury. As you can see, it's a similar format, and you can basically go through the website and choose how to display the data and information. So thank you, and I hope this has been useful.
So thank you, Dian. This was the space we were going to use to conduct a Q&A. Unfortunately, we had that interruption during the live webinar. But I just want to take a few moments to ask Dian a couple of questions about her study and other subsequent things that have happened in the wake of her study. So first, Dian, how did you go about conducting this audit? It seems pretty extensive and detailed. Did you have support? Who did you use for sort of the manpower with this, and how did you conduct it on the ground?
Sure. So far we've conducted two walk audits into two different neighborhoods in Houston. The first one is Gulfton, and the next one is near North Side. So for the Gulfton project, we basically work with our resident volunteers, and we work extensively with local organizations that have been around in Gulfton for a long time and have really close connections with residents. So for example, we work closely with Super Neighborhood Alliance in Gulfton and with Connect Community and also with Link Houston to really get the word out there about the walk audit and why we needed to do this, and organize an event around it. So we had several events that we set aside a couple of Saturdays to conduct the walk audit, and we have really overwhelming support from residents who really come and really wanted to help out with collecting this data. What we did for those days are we basically conduct an on-site training manual and go through the questions briefly and assign different groups to different parts of the neighborhood. And then, we set aside a time to do the audit and then come back and perhaps have a little bit discussion about what happened. And several people actually took really great photos about the neighborhood conditions, which you can see at our report. And that has been really another powerful tool to kind of complement the walk audit, that if you can visually show the conditions of this area, then it gives a more powerful illustrations of the conditions in your neighborhood. And then the second neighborhood where we've conducted a walk audit is we've really started working with groups of students from University of Houston and now recently University of Houston downtown. And these are, students that are studying health, public health, and the relationship of health with their environment. And then also students that are studying communications. So we work with the professors to set aside time to train students in how to answer these questions and have days where students can go out to the neighborhoods and conduct the walk audit.
Thank you. That is really interesting in terms of all of the different parties that are collaborating to make those happen. The second question that I had was more related to what has happened in the wake of the research that you and the community members in different institutions conducted. Has anything changed? Have there been any steps taken to correct a lot of the blockages and different hazards and barriers that you found in the Gulfton area or otherwise? So are there any initiatives happening around that as a result of this research?
Yeah, so we're very excited. We're very excited to see that how a lot of efforts in Gulfton are coming together around this issue. Safety concerns has been a major problem in the neighborhoods because the neighborhoods have seen several people, even children, being killed while walking along the streets of Gulfton. So just yesterday, the mayor announced Houston Safer Streets Phase 1 initiative that the city have been working with organization called Together for Safer Roads. And in conjunction with all the other local organizations like Connect Community and Super Neighborhood Alliance and all the other groups that are working together towards this initiative. And I think that part of that process is that they are assigning some funding, and the Public Works Department is matching that funding to make a lot of improvements at intersections and sidewalks along the streets in Gulfton. So that's really a really exciting part to seeing how our study could contribute to that efforts, really, because it's an ongoing collaborative efforts by different organizations, but conducting this study has allowed us to be able to highlight these issues in a particular way, in a way that we bring residents' concerns into a more systematic platform using data collection.
That's really exciting. Thank you for sharing that with us, and I'll be sure to keep seeing how that goes. So, like I said, this was the time when we were going to take questions, but if you have any questions after you view this webinar recording, the complete recording, please feel free to still submit them to us using the HCDC email. So that would be hcdc@rice.edu. Our team monitors that email pretty closely, and so we will try to answer any questions that you have to the best of our ability and connect you with resources that will be useful to you. So last but not least, we want to give you some information to look for in the coming weeks and months. First of all, I want to thank you all for your interest and for participating, even for the brief time that we had with you live. But just a few things in closing. First, I want to mention that we will be adding several new featured indicators to the dashboard in the near future. Specifically, we'll be highlighting data from the third ward that was collected and analyzed through a recent mobility assessment in that area. So similar to the data that we highlighted here today with Gulfton, we're going to be adding some really rich data about safety and community health and other related things in the third ward area. In addition, you'll be receiving an online feedback survey soon in the next couple of days that asks for your thoughts on this second webinar. So please take a couple of minutes to complete it so that we can make our next webinars more useful to you and more tailored to your own needs and your own work. Also, we recently launched our training page on the HCDC site. It's located at datahouston.org/learn, and you can visit it to find more info on upcoming webinars and trainings and to access various training materials that we'll post there as we create them and finalize them for public use. And finally, as always, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to email hcdc@rice.edu. Thank you, and we hope to connect with you soon.